Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of Strange Times Poetry Broadcast. I'm so glad you could join me here live at the Poetry Bookshelf to read 3 uplifting poems. If you haven't watched this before, please check out our Facebook page, Strange Times Poetry Broadcast, to like and subscribe for future issues. If you've been enjoying and watching Strange Times Poetry Broadcast, please share it with your friends, on your Facebook wall, with anyone you think it might bring solace or joy. Today I'm going to be reading 3 poems about breakups, or as I would say, breaking free, breaking away. Sometimes, of course, breakups are terrible and really horrible, painful things, but sometimes there is an element of freedom in there and of joy, of finally getting off of the roller coaster. And that's what these 3 poems celebrate. And I think also is relevant in our time is the idea that sometimes we just need to take a break from the news, from whatever is going on in our day. We can't break up entirely with this situation, but maybe we can break away or break free for a few moments to find some clarity, to take a walk, to read a poem. Something that gives us a little bit of a moment of freedom is really important. And also thinking about how we can break up with some of the cycles of stress that we fall into in these times. All right, so the first poem that I'm going to read is called Mrs. Midas. It's by Carol Ann Duffy, and I heard her read it at Mass Poetry, and it was absolutely hilarious. It's from her collection, World's Wife, where she writes different poems from the perspective of wives of historical and mythological figures. Mrs. Midas. It was late September. I just poured a glass of wine, begun to unwind while the vegetables cooked. The kitchen filled with the smell of itself, relaxed, its steamy breath gently blanching the windows. So I opened one, then with my fingers wiped the other's glass like a brow. He was standing under the pear tree, snapping a twig. Now the garden was long and the visibility poor, the way the dark of the ground seems to drink the light of the sky, but that twig in his hand was gold. And then he plucked a pear from a branch. We grew fondant d'automne, and it sat in his hand like a light bulb. On. I thought to myself, is he putting fairy lights in the tree? He came into the house. The doorknobs gleamed. He drew the blinds. You know the mind. I thought of the field of the cloth of gold and of Miss Macready. He sat in that chair like a king on a burnished throne. The look on his face was strange, wild, vain. I said, what in the name of God is going on? He started to laugh. I served up the meal. For starters, corn on the cob. Within seconds, he was spitting out the teeth of the rich. He toyed with his spoon, then mine, then with the knives, the forks. He asked, where was the wine? I poured with a shaking hand a fragrant bone-dry wine from Italy, then watched as he picked up the glass, goblet, golden chalice, drank. It was then that I started to scream. He sank to his knees. After we both calmed down, I finished the wine on my own, hearing him out. I made him sit on the other side of the room and keep his hands to himself. I locked the cat in the cellar. I moved the phone. The toilet I didn't mind. I couldn't believe my ears. How he'd had a wish. Look, we all have wishes granted. But who has wishes granted? Him. Do you know about gold? It feeds no one. Arum, soft, untarnishable, slakes no thirst. He tried to light a cigarette. I gazed, entranced, as the blue flame played on its luteous stem. At least, I said, you'll be able to give up smoking for good. Separate beds. In fact, I put a chair against my door, near petrified. He was below, turning the spare room into the tune of Tutankhamen. You see, we were passionate there in those halcyon days, unwrapping each other rapidly like presents, like fast food. But now I feared his honey embrace, the kiss that would turn my lips to a work of art. And who, when it comes to the crunch, can live with a heart of gold? That night, I dreamt I bore his child, its perfect oar limbs, its little tongue like a precious lash, its amber eyes holding their pupils like flies. My dream milk burned in my breasts. I woke to the streaming sun, so we had to move out. We'd a caravan in the wilds, in a glade of its own. I drove him up under the cover of dark. He sat in the back. And then I came home, the woman who married the fool who wished for gold. At first, I visited, odd times, parking the car away off, then walking. You knew you were getting close, golden trout on the grass. One day, a hare hung from a larch, a beautiful lemon mistake, and then his footprints glistening next to the river's path. He was thin, delirious, hearing, he said, the music of Pan from the woods. Listen, that was the last straw. What gets me now is not the idiocy or greed, but the lack of thought for me. Pure selfishness. I sold the contents of the house and came down here. I think of him in certain lights, dawn, late afternoon, and once a bowl of apples stopped me dead. I miss most, even now, his hands, his warm hands on my skin, his touch. I just love how she completely dives into this story, the images of what it would actually be like to have everything you touch turn to gold. And I love her voice and how she's just so fed up with this guy and his vanity that he didn't even think of her. Sometimes, even though this is a somewhat sad poem, I think sometimes just the pure hilarity of the story is uplifting on its own. This next poem is by Sophia Holtz, another Jewish poet, and it's called Thaw. It first appeared in BOAAT Press. And in this poem, I think it's kind of a pre-breakup, a breakup with an ideal of what someone could be before it even happens. Thaw. Let's agree, you're great, but this world is certainly doomed. I can't afford the price of onions, and winter never started. Consider the rats living between the third rail and puddles of filth at 96th Street. The family wedding last month was full of smoke, but the chicken was truly delicious. All the men did shots of clear liqueur, and all the women stood around. Men are full of rituals like short hugs or shouting in inscrutable unison. A number of people turned to me and said, "You're probably next. Someone out there wants me doing your laundry." Me floating from room to room like a swan imagined by someone who has never been attacked by one. Dear human, I'm not a ballerina. Dear human, let's never combine our book collections. Everything is melting around us, and God, I think we're goners. Let's wake up tomorrow morning. Let's plant a field of onions. Let's agree. Breathing is lovely, even when the air is thin. I love the snarkiness of this poem. I love the concept of painting the speaker dancing from room to, floating from room to room like a swan, but only imagined by someone who doesn't know how violent swans are when you get attacked by them. And I love the address, "Dear human, let's not put our book collections together. Let's not have this marriage. Let's just breathe. Let's have some freedom here. Plant our onions and breathe the air, which is, albeit thin, still wonderful." There's a lot of freedom. The break free in this poem is very clear. Thanks, Sophia. I love this one. And my last poem is also a little bit of a breakup poem or a comment on a complicated relationship. And it's called Bessho, but it's spelled like the mountain in Norway, not like kiss. Bessho. I asked for a kiss and you gave me a mountain in Norway. We've had stranger miscommunications. I asked for a kiss and you poured me a cup of molten mercury. We made love with it on our hands, then sat and watched a liquid grow solid, roll across the floor in fat silver bubbles. Another misunderstanding. I asked for a mountain in Norway and you gave me a volume of Japanese poetry, a crater from Mercury, and a gift certificate to schmaltzy sushi place in Boston. Cream cheese sushi is not a thing. I asked for a half-burnt house, all we could afford, where we might live as if always after the fire. So this poem is almost a reverse pun because you have Besso's kisses, Bessho the mountain in Norway, you have Bessho, the sushi place in Boston, and they're all coming together for this sort of joyous misunderstanding of relationships and in the end people who end up living in this half-burnt house. And I love the joy of this poem in its language. And also sometimes even mistakes and misunderstandings can be a little bit joyful. Maybe if you're free of them, or maybe if you just learn to see the humor in them. I hope that you are staying safe and sane, and I hope to see you all very soon. Thanks for joining me. Good night. Bye.